Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this episode, we're going to talk about music. More specifically, we're going to talk about when the music died. Now, you may be listening or watching on YouTube and think, well, damn, when did music die? Well, the version of music that we have today is vastly different from the way music was 15, 20, 25 years ago. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about some things that maybe some of you not really familiar with file sharing, bootlegging, and streaming, and all of that good stuff. But just talk about the music. So, uh, to talk about music, I had to get this guy on. He's been on here before, a friend of the show. He blessed us on the HBCU podcast, which was really dope. In fact, I think he was the first person I actually interviewed for that podcast, which was my favorite podcast of that year. No stranger to the show, the host of the Vault Classic Reviews Music Podcast, my man B Cox is in the building. B Cox, what's going on, man?
Yo, Kyle, man. I appreciate you for having me on. And shout out to everybody out there, all the listeners, man. Definitely, we know Kyle. I am a friend of the show. Kyle was a friend of my show as well. Kyle has done a couple of reviews with me last year. This last year, we did 2 reviews, one for Outcast, AT Aliens, and also did Stakes is High with De La Soul. And actually, man, you don't know that De La Soul episode is still consistently in my top 5 of listens, man, all the time.
They were. Wow.
Yeah, so we did something dope there, man. So I'm pumped to come and talk about this. And this is something that I have firsthand experience with based on the time that I came up in acquiring music, because I have the best of both worlds. I went through the analog way, and then I went through this new way. So I'm psyched to talk about it.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, you guys can tell we got a true music head here on here. If you haven't listened or heard his podcast before, and we're going to definitely talk about his podcast and where you can find him before we get out of here. But let's take it back, man. I full disclosure, I'm a little bit older than B Cox, just a little bit, just a little bit. But yeah, we both of us huge music heads. And man, it's funny. Before we even get started, man, I want to congratulate you, because by the time most of our listeners will hear this, you guys will be at 100 episodes of the Vault Classic Music Reviews podcast, man. Before we get started, man, talk to us about what that feels like, man. 100 episodes, man. That's a major accomplishment.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been cool because, like, I started this almost 2.5 years ago, and I've been wanting to do a podcast. I tell people since 2006. When I worked in a radio station, I worked at Radio One with a partnership between Radio One and XM, and I was a tech producer. I worked the boards, and I would basically, record the shows. I would work the shows and basically do the show clips and everything else. I wanted to do a podcast since then. I finally got one started, and I wanted to do something about music and I based it off of my times of speaking about music with my friends at the lunch table in high school. And that's really what the Vault is. We used to sit there and debate about music, talk about the things that came out, what albums we like, what tracks we like, which artists we liked. And we've been doing this for 2.5 years. I've had a few bonus segments, but now we're actually at episode number 100. And it's crazy, man. I just got to thank everybody for who supported it. Like, I got listeners in places that I've never been before, which is wild. And I've heard from people in countries that I've never been before. So it definitely opens your eye to let you know that, when you're passionate about doing something, and if you love what you do, then it's not work. And so for me, this show has been a pleasure to do, and to welcome on and have guests with, yourself, people like the Professor, Nathan Rideau, folks like Charlie D of Word and Mother Podcast, D&T of the Perfectly Imperfect Couple podcast, Uche and QD of Ill-Advised Wise Guys. I've met a lot of dope people doing this pod, man. So, and all the other supporters through our Twitter crew that's on there throughout the day, way too many of them to name, but shout out to all of them. You know what I'm saying? Jay, Mike, OTR, Tamara, all of them, they're all like really dope content creators. But it's been a cool journey, man. I'm looking forward to continuing it.
No doubt, man. 100 that's saying a lot, man, because you and I both know a lot of people don't get past 10 when it comes to episodes.
Oh man,
so, to get on 100 is something. You're really saying something at that point. Mm-hmm. As far as the music, man, let's go back to the mid 90s. When you were consuming music, and I know you always talk about on the podcast about how you got a lot of your music from your older sisters.
Hmm.
But how did you get music? Was it just from your older sisters? Did you go to record stores and buy your music, or when did how did you consume it like that?
Well, man, mostly the times that I consumed music when I was a kid, elementary school age, most of it was through my parents' speakers,
Okay.
and if it wasn't in my parents' speakers through, a 45 or a 12-inch record back in the day, way, way back in the day, then
Yep.
eventually it was through a tape deck or eventually a CD player. My dad had a nice surround sound system that, he'd put in the basement. Then it was in my sister's cars, going on the way to go shopping, haircuts, whatever, and then hanging around with my cousins and being around them and their systems. And then right around 94, 95, when I started, having my job cutting grass, is when I started being able to buy music myself. And for that, it was a little bit of a tricky thing because I had to buy music that more often than not had parental advisory stickers on them. So I had to sometimes hide what I was buying and bring it into the house. Now, I would get a lot of things dubbed from my sisters. Like, yo, we had a joint on the vault about the Legend of the Blank Tape. Yo, let me get a dub. And a
Gotta
lot
get
of
it
my
done.
music up until I would say high school was of dubbed music, whether it was CDs or tapes. And then when I started buying music around 94, 95, when I was in middle school, then it became a trade-off of buying and then also getting dubs, whether it's from my sisters or from friends in school. By the time I was in high school, it was in full swing. So I mentioned the shoebox that I had of tapes. Well, then that shoebox became like 2 or 3 shoeboxes of CDs and tapes. And then I started buying music more, the more money I started making, because it was like, yeah, the dubs are cool, man. But eventually you want to have your own copies.
Hmm.
And so then I went from the shoebox to the book. Everybody had if you had CDs, you had a book. You had
Yes.
to have the book, and you would flip through the pages and try to find whatever it was you were looking for, stick it in that CD player in the house or in the car, more than likely was the car, and then you ride and then keep going. So that's how I consumed music back then in the day, man. That led me up all the way until about high school. And then I went away to college and brought my books and my shoe boxes, all of them up there with me, with my stereo. And so I was planning on being able to, consume music that way. You know,
Mm.
had a Walkman, but eventually upgraded the Walkman to a Discman. So yeah, that's how I consume my music back then in those days. As many of us did.
Oh,
It
no
was
question.
you stay with a Walkman and stay with a Discman, and everybody who had either that shoebox. Some folks had the fancy tape deck, the one you could stack them up. I didn't
Yes.
have
Yes.
that. I had shoeboxes, man. That was it.
Hmm. Oh man, you taking me back. It's funny because like I remember all of that era of how you purchased your music. For me, like I said, I'm slightly older than B Cox. So in
Hmm.
the mid '90s, I'm at South Carolina State University in college, and I just remember like having a little bit of money, and I would buy CDs or whatever like that because I went from cassette tapes to CDs. The first, and I mentioned on this podcast, it's worth repeating. The first CD that I bought was uh, TLC's album, "Crazy Sexy Cool,"
Oh,
and
hmm,
and that was after I bought that CD. I was hooked. Um, I was buying CDs left and right whenever I could, and then
hmm,
just like anything else, you're in college, HBCU campus, you know,
hmm.
money's not really there, so and we're not going to dry snitch on ourselves on here, even though the statute of limitations probably passed by now. I may or may not have a friend that may have worked at a record store, and I
Mm,
may have gone to the record store, and he may have you know I may have paid for one, and he may have put, I don't know, two, three, five, seven, in a bag.
hmm.
Maybe I don't know that
Maybe,
possibly
possibly,
could have happened.
possibly, yeah.
My memory's kind of foggy. I'm getting old, so so I accumulated quite a few CDs, back in that
Hmm.
time, uh, like that because CDs and stuff at that particular time, you start talking about 95, 96. Music was so dope, but it's like
Mm,
had to have it. Like there was something,
yeah,
and you guys talk about this all the time on your podcast. There was something dope coming out every other week,
yeah.
and it wasn't like where how it is now, where music was so readily available at your fingertips. When you bought, if trust me, if you purchase something for $8.99, you gonna play that joint forever. Like it wasn't no oh man, I'm done with the CD. No, you're gonna play it because you invested your money and your time into it.
Yeah.
Um, now if we go back even further, well, actually around that time, even into the, I would say these early 2000s, bootlegging was, pretty, pretty heavy.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
you grew up in the DMV,
Yeah.
Metro DC area,
Mm-hmm.
PG County.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so were there any bootleg spots in PG County that you may or may not have visited?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time, any place where my barber sold,
Mm,
excuse me, anywhere where my barber cut,
gotcha.
bootleg tapes, CDs were being sold.
Mhm.
And it didn't help that in some places where he was at in mall called PG Plaza, now it's called the Mall of Prince George's, though it's still PG Plaza, Capitol
Yeah,
Plaza,
I've
where
heard of it before.
where my barber cut at, there was also a store in there called PA Palace. And those of y'all who listen to my,
Me.
Legend of the Blank Tape and also record release Tuesdays, PA Palace is the one that sold the majority of the Go-Go Band tapes.
Mhm.
And so, ironically enough, in these two barbershops and these two malls where my barber mostly cut, I would say in the early to mid 90s, there was always a presence of not only PA Palace, but then also somebody there selling bootleg tapes too. So anywhere where I went to a barbershop, Landover Mall, PG Plaza, Capitol Plaza, there were always people there selling bootleg stuff. And, hey, the barbershop is notoriously one of the best places, and you
Facts.
know this, to be
Facts.
able to acquire bootleg material. And,
Mhm.
because you have no ending supply of customers throughout the day, especially if it's a weekend. Friday, Saturday, guys, and even some ladies going there to go get their hair cut. And people already at that time, this is around the time, when nobody was paying with cards in barbershops.
No,
I mean,
no, no.
this whole thing
Cards.
with people paying with cards and barbershops now is a phenomenon that probably just started, I want to say, somewhere in the mid aughts. I mean, probably
Mhm.
really even in this decade, the last decade. And but that's back then, everybody who went to the barbershop was paying with cash. Your barber was taking cash. So if you had to pay with cash, then you more than likely had, if you were your haircut back then was like maybe $10. If you were
Yep.
getting a shape up back then, maybe it was $5. So you always brought more money than you needed to.
Mhm.
So hey, if you brought maybe a $20 and your haircut's $10, you tip your barber maybe $5 and maybe even 10. You might roll with maybe $20 or $30 in your pocket. That extra 10, if there's two tapes there that you want to buy and the bootleg man has them, let me go ahead and let you slide you that 10 and get those two tapes, man. And
Mhm.
so that's the way it was. Now, I didn't really buy too many bootleg things. When I did it when my sister would drop me off at the barbershop and then come back and come get me
Okay.
because she didn't want me buying bootleg stuff. She was like, either I'm gonna burn it for you or I'm gonna buy it for you,
Yep.
but you're not gonna give him money for that music. But a couple of times I did actually reach in my pocket when she was there and said, yo, let me get that Method Man. Let me get that
Mhm.
Raekwon. Let me get that whatever. And a
Mhm.
couple of times I did, boy. And I had to, sort of sneak the tape in my pocket as I was leaving, and then pull it out when I got back to the crib. But
Mm.
yeah, the bootleg guys were always there. Barbershops, yeah, man. It's like endless supply of customers. Why wouldn't you go there?
Yeah, man.
So yeah.
You're right. You're right. All facts. It was the same way in South Carolina. I had the same experiences, even when I moved here to Atlanta. Like you said,
Mm,
barbershops. That's where they definitely were. There were record stores and stuff like that would sell, but then you'd always have somebody somewhere around the way. Hey, man, I got this such, like that. So it was always somebody trying to hustle something.
mm-hmm,
Much like you, I didn't really buy a lot of bootleg tapes, and the reason being was that I just remember getting a couple of CDs and the quality just didn't sound the way that I wanted it to sound.
mm,
And I was
yeah,
just like, yo, if I'm gonna spend, $5, yeah, okay, yeah.
mm-hmm,
This CD costs $10 in the store. This Jay-Z CD costs $10 in the store. I got it for five. It don't sound the same. I might as well
mm-mm.
pay the 10, because
There you
I
go.
wanted to bump in my Nissan Sentra. You know what I'm
Of
saying?
course,
So,
of course, yeah.
so um, but yeah, bootlegging was very prevalent back in the day, and it was a way to, like you said, the customers, as far as the fans were concerned, we could readily get to the music. It was quick,
Mm-hmm,
and the thing that kept the bootleggers in business was that you knew that they were almost never going to sell out.
mm-hmm,
Um, I talked about it on the podcast once before, how like, and you guys touched on it too, on when the music came out on Tuesdays, in some places, if you did not get that particular CD, that hot CD that was coming out, if you didn't get
Mm-hmm.
it the day that it dropped, or maybe 2 days after it dropped, you ran the risk of not getting it at all. So I mean,
Yeah.
like, I know people that, the Chronic came out and it was heavily, I mean, like, you couldn't go anywhere on South Carolina State's campus without hearing the Chronic. But I know
Mm-hmm.
people who didn't get it the first week that it came out, and it was
Mm-hmm.
sold out everywhere, not just record stores, but everywhere. So, you
Yeah.
know, it sucked to be them. So now you're walking around and you're calling the record store, hey man, y'all got that Chronic? It's like, wow, we
Mm.
might get another shipment in on Monday,
Right.
but it's Thursday and you gotta wait,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it, it was bootleggers, they did their thing, and it was it was what it was. I'll just put it
Yeah.
like
Oh
that.
yeah. And the bootleggers didn't just sell music either. They sold movies too. And they would
Movies.
sell the jankiest copies of movies ever. Like some of the bootleg movies, like literally, you see people standing up and walking like it's in
Mhm.
the theater. You hear audience laughter in the background. It's just like, yo, man, this is somebody literally. A nigga walked into the theater with a camera and sat there and kept it inside of his jacket and sat
Right.
there and filmed it at the very top level of seats to get the whole movie.
Mhm.
But they
Because
would
there
get
were no
that.
cell phones. There were no cell phones
Yeah.
back then.
There wasn't no cell phones back then, man. So people would sit there and buy these bootleg movies and they would be the worst quality. But if you really wanted to see it, you pay the $5 to buy the
Yep.
bootleg
Pay the
tape.
$5.
The $5 to $10 to get the bootleg tape. Now, back then, the movies weren't that expensive.
No.
But if you could buy something for $5 or $10 and watch it over and over and over again, then you would
Share it
do
with your
it.
friends.
Yeah, and share with your friends. Exactly.
No
Yeah.
doubt.
So the bootleg guys served many purposes for us, man. It was, if you needed a copy of something, you knew it was coming out, you would get it at a discounted price. And then if you were looking to buy something, see, and the thing about the bootleg guys, that he knew many different things. He sold, CDs and tapes, but he could
Yeah.
pretty much tell you where to get almost anything else, it seems like, too, man.
Facts. Everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Now, as we moved and transitioned into the 2000s, file sharing became a thing. And you know what, man, I can't even really pinpoint when it happened. I think for me, it was somewhere around 2000, not late 99, early 2000 for me. What were your first memories of file sharing? And was there a particular, CD or album that you made? Because what happens is, kids, and let me just explain for you real quick. What would happen would be I would have a song. Let's say I would have, I don't know, let's just say Snoop Dogg. I would have Snoop Dogg's latest album on my computer, on my hard drive. I would log into a file sharing site, whether it be Kazaa or LimeWire or whatever, and anybody in the world, including B Cox, could log into that same thing. And if they see that I have Snoop Dogg new album on my computer, he could then tap into my computer through that file sharing place and download it from my computer. So I'm doing exactly that, file sharing. So he's able to get Snoop Dogg's new album without even speaking to me, without even compensating me. And more importantly, we're not even compensating Snoop in this process.
Exactly.
Or the record companies. But I just wanted to kind of, paint the picture a little bit. What was your first memories of file sharing?
Man. So right around the time when the file sharing revolution got into full swing, I was in college. Okay. Now talk about meeting
school at
the Morgan State University, Baltimore, Maryland.
There you go. Represent.
Charm City. City. So at Morgan State, man, and we're in the middle of on the back end of the .com bubble bursting. And, this .com bubble, for those of you, was right around the late 90s, where so many different internet startup companies happening. And then eventually the market over-leveraged itself and these companies burst and they went broke. And so when I was in high school, really, that's when Napster started. And Napster was really the first popular, I would say, for public consumption file sharing site that was out there. That was the market disruptor. That was the one that got everybody in the music industry, got the RIAA, got Dr. Dre and Metallica and so many different other people got their underwear in a bunch. Because you mean to tell me that people are putting music on the internet and they're getting it for free? And let's not even talk about the record companies. So in high school, basically, Napster comes out. I get to Morgan, the fall of 2000. By the time I get to my sophomore year in 2001, everything file sharing is in the full spree. Now, the first file sharing client I downloaded was Kazaa. That was the big one. And for those of y'all who were out there, who were outside and around at that time, know just how much of a goat the Kazaa was as a file sharing client. But it didn't just end there, because there were so many of them out there. Now, when I stayed in Rollins Hall, actually, this was Rollins Hall that was had the dining hall and what we call the Refec at Morgan, also had these suites, and these suites would have 5 rooms in them and 10 suite mates in a suite with a shared bathroom, 4 showers, 4 toilets, 4 sinks, everything else. And what we had is 10 guys in there, and half of the folks in there were computer science majors. So when you want to talk about when it came to file sharing, and it wasn't just file sharing through peer-to-peer clients, it was torrents, it was wares. So we were getting everything. So I found out about Kazaa, and I knew about Kazaa from my freshman year. By the time I got to my sophomore year with my suite mates, I found out about Song Spy. I found out about and learned more about Audio Galaxy, which is a little bit more out there, but definitely wasn't as underground as Kazaa and Song Spy were. Then there were these BitTorrent sites where you can get other whole albums and movies and games. So it became an ongoing exercise within our suite to try to find the peer-to-peer network that would get you, one, the best quality stuff that you were looking for,
facts,
and the one that could get downloaded the fastest, because you're reliant partially on not just your internet connection, but the internet connection of the user who you were downloading the file from. So we were looking for everything. It was music. It was mostly music, but then there were also times we were going to get movies. And our move, and I hate to have to say this, but our move was, and me and my roommate, the guy who I stayed with, my boy, shout out to my boy Rob, by the way. Our move was, man, to try to download movies. And it'd be nothing to be across campus and the shorter you dig and be like, yo, man, this is 2001. So it's like, yo, I got that training day in the crib, like, what I'm saying? You try to come watch it, like training day, but it just came out of theaters, right? Yeah, I got it though. Like, I got it. She was like, is it a videotape? Is it bootleg? I'm like, no, it's not bootleg. Like, it is a file. I played it on my computer. I was like, well, we could watch it right there in the crib. Like, I got it. I got that training day. What else was I pulling? I got that Ali. And so it was easy. It would be like, yo, I now, and I may or may not have had a couple of young ladies come up to my room to watch movies,
right?
And just watch movies, if you know what I'm saying. So,
right.
But yeah, but that's what we did, man. We got we would download music, and then if we would find, one person would find something, and then you didn't have success later on, because sometimes you would download these files, you get 50% through, 75% of the way through, and then all of a sudden it would stop. And you're like, hold on, what happened? You would leave something to download, go to class, come back. Maybe it will be finished. Maybe it wouldn't be. So we had whole albums. We had songs. And the fall of 2001, one of the first big albums that I downloaded that was leaked was Blueprint by Jay-Z.
Yes.
Another one that I found out on peer-to-peer file sharing on, I think it was Kazaa, was the first time I downloaded and heard Ether. So
yes.
And that made its way through wildfire through the campus, because a lot of people got on the file sharing clients and were like, yo, that new Nas track came out. Did you download it yet? And so it created like this almost to a point where, and computers back then, I mean, you had space, but I started running out of space soon.
Yeah.
So then I started taking data CDs and putting these songs on CDs and burning them and ripping them, to eventually where I could free space back up on my computer so I could download more music, And then eventually dominoes started to fall, because then Kazaa got shut down. Song Spy, which is one of my favorite ones, got shut down. Audio Galaxy eventually transitioned to a pay network. And then another one popped up. And this is the most popular one that all you're going to remember now, is LimeWire. And LimeWire stuck around for quite some time. And LimeWire became one of the most popular file sharing clients out there amongst those who were into downloading music. And by the time I was leaving At that time, LimeWire was actually, I think, still going on strong. Though there is another part about this whole downloading with files on with peer-to-peer networks that you had to be careful with. And I'm pretty sure we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But when I was in college, that was a thing. Everybody was downloading music. And were we buying music? Hell no, because we were broke. Our money was going towards, for the most part, if it wasn't going towards clothes, it was going towards food. It was going towards alcohol. For those of us who partook in it, it was going towards weed. So, who had money to buy music? Like, who's buying music? Okay, the CD and DVD man on the bridge at Morgan, he got it. Dude with the dreadlocks, CDs, DVDs, yo, I got them. You could buy it for $5 a pop, but then you could just download it on your computer and save that $5 for a Nick bag.
Right. That is so true, man. You taking me back, because that's exactly how it was. And it's funny hearing your story, because you were in college and I was, in the world, because at that time, you talk of 2001, I'm at that point, I'm married and I'm a father. Dion, because we had Dion in 99, we got married in 2000, 2001, we bought our house. So I'm going through these milestones as a young man, but I'm still, at this point, I'm like, I've been buying music all my young adult life, but now this new file sharing shit, the music's free. At least in my mind, it's like it's free.
It's free.
And so it's like, I just remember, man, and just to get kind of, put it in context for those of you who weren't around for this time. Like if the new Jay-Z album was on Kazaa, because I used Kazaa for a long time, and what's funny is you can't see it, but I have a hard drive over here in where I record at in my office, and the hard drive, I haven't tried to turn it on in a couple of years, but I'm sure if it turned on, there is a file that still has music files from where I downloaded from Kazaa.
Wow.
And I mean, these are songs that are, songs and albums that are already out, and, and I have most of them already or whatever. I have access to them, through Spotify or whatever like that. But just to give you an idea, if I'm going to download the new Jay-Z album, I click on the Kazaa link, and like B Cox said, I'm trying to find someone who has, a higher speed, or quality. And keep in mind, folks,
T1.
Yes.
That T1 connection was the money in the bank.
If you had T1 connection, man, everybody, and folks, I want you to understand, T1 was like having Wi-Fi, but there was no such thing as Wi-Fi. But T1 was your fastest connection. So even if I had a slower connection at my crib, if I'm downloading from B Cox, he's got T1, I know that I'm going to download this Jay-Z album in about 30 minutes. Yeah. Now, if I'm on T2 or T3 and he's on that, then, I may have to start downloading the Jay-Z album, go to work and come back, and it still might be downloading. It just depends, because, everybody's internet service, where everybody didn't have high speed, Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi wasn't invented yet. So it was all predicated on the, connections that you had in your computer and your service or what have you. Yeah. But yeah, B Cox touched on a great point that I want to expound on. What he said was perfect. You downloaded that file, and what happened was that file is there. So let's say you download, 20 songs, or let's say you download 20 different albums. What happens is your computer's going to run out of space. So a little funny thing happened. People started selling blank CDs. And this concept and novelty took off like wildfire, because at that point you could go to, and I'm sure you used to do the same thing, you could go to your Sam Goodies or your Best Buys or Radio Shack or wherever, buy 20 blank CDs. And if you have a thing within your hard drive where you can burn the CD, you burn. So the new Jay-Z that I just downloaded, I can burn it to my CD. Now I have the Jay-Z CD and I have the free space on my computer, so I don't have to worry about taking up space. Yeah, it was a time. It was a time. And it was so many albums and stuff that we downloaded that honestly, we probably, if we had the money, we probably would have bought. But the thing about it was this music was coming so rapidly that, and I had a job. You were in college, but I had a job. I couldn't spend $100 on, the everybody's CD. I just couldn't.
Who could, man? Yeah.
So, that was a time, man. And like you said, file sharing. Napster was the big dog, and obviously Napster went down. And once Napster went down, but what it did was it opened the door for us as consumers to get access to music without having to pay for it. And we'll touch
Yeah,
on it a little later, but that probably was the downfall of where music is,
yeah.
um, because there was really no recovery from it as far as the record companies were concerned.
Oh
Um,
yeah. But yeah, and the thing is, there was a scene in The Social Network, the movie about Facebook, where
yes, yes,
Sean Parker, who actually also helped to create the phenomenon of Napster with Sean Fanning,
right.
and they're talking in the cafe that they're sitting there. He said, the guy, he's like, I created Napster, like, hey, look, we had to shut it down, but we pissed a lot of people off. He's like, well, we won. And he was like, one, he said, the record companies won. He was like, yeah, you want to buy Tower Records?
Yeah.
Would you actually go and buy Tower Records now? Absolutely not. Why? Because nobody's going to buy music anymore.
Mhm.
So not only did it kill the record store, as you have touched on in your pod this year, and I have touched on in my pod. I mean, there are still some of them out there, but
Mhm.
the Sam Goodies, the Tower Records, the Nobody Beats the Wiz, these a lot of these places aren't around anymore because the appetite for physical consumption of some mediums of music are not there anymore.
Mhm.
And it also shook up the record industry because as some of the things, that we read, they were arrogant thinking that, this can't happen to us, but it
Right.
did. And so now
Right.
it changed the way that music was being distributed, the way it was marketed, and the way that it was consumed by the public forever. So, yeah.
You actually going right where I wanted to go next. As far as like just how much the record industry suffered from it. And what do you think as far as like how much it suffered from it? And then conversely, what do you think some of the positives were on the other side from file sharing, if there were
So
any?
So the thing about with file sharing, what it did, and the illegal file sharing and downloading the music for free was one thing. But what it did was it opened up Pandora's box to consume music the way that we consume it now. I mean, look at the way that we consume music now. Apple
Mhm.
Music, Spotify. Before that, you had all these different sites that you can download. AOL had AOL Music back then in the day where you could stream on a radio based on a certain genre you wanted to listen to. It did change up the way that we listen to music. The record companies got themselves in a bunch because, oh, that CD that used to go 4, 5, 6 times platinum that was now only going platinum or double platinum now
Right.
because
Right.
people weren't going out to buy music as much anymore. When I look at some of these record numbers from some of these albums reviews from the 90s, I'm astounded at how much I'm like, yo, this joint was 6 times platinum. This went 8 times platinum. This is diamond.
Yes.
It really was something like, wow, like they were really making money hand over fist. So then when you do that, the negative consequence of this is this. The record company doesn't sell as the record stores don't sell as many records. The
Mhm.
record labels don't make as much money. What
Right.
happens is that record companies' budgets get affected by marketing, by recording, by artists in development. A&Rs aren't necessarily more as needed because you got to pay them less. So then the negative consequence of it is that the record label is always going to make sure that they make their money. So what happened is that I think some artists got shorted more. And then not only that, I think that some record labels are probably more reluctant to go out there and sign the act and take a gamble to try to sign someone and develop them. Because if that act doesn't pan out, you give them an advance of $250,000, however much you
Mhm.
spend X amount of money recording this album, marketing this album, developing this album, and then it doesn't sell X amount of records. Well, that's a lost cause, you
Lost.
know? And then as an artist, you're stuck into a contract where I got to sort of recoup these finances that this company spent on me. So a
Mhm.
negative impact of that is that the record companies eventually didn't make as much money as they possibly could. We know a lot of record companies folded. So many
Yes.
of them folded. Now it's to the point where we have these major record labels, these Universals, the Sonys, um, the E1 Musics, like that have bought so many companies, have consolidated them now, where media is pretty much distributed between 4 or 5 different companies now. And
Mhm.
it wasn't that way back in the day because if you had a label, even if it was independent, because of the way we consumed music, you had a good chance of making money if you had good music.
Yes.
Now, there's not that. I mean, there's only a few people distributing out there.
Right.
The record companies now have, when it comes to distributing on a major scale, have cornered the market. Now, here's uh, the positive influences of what this file sharing thing has done. It changed the way we consume and buy music if we buy it, and then now everything's streaming. What
Mm-hmm.
it did was it created an avenue for a whole nother set of companies, for providers to be able to make music available digitally. What it did also is let the record industry know they finally had to adapt from the model that they had for years. And that was the model that allowed them to screw so many artists out of money, out of
Yes.
recording contracts that were predatory in nature, that were, that were so unfair that pretty much, they robbed you for your publishing and of your masters and everything else. And the only thing you had left at the end of the day, even if you didn't have that, was your dignity,
Yeah.
if you had that.
If you had that.
So what it did was eventually open up the possibilities of what could be done in the recording industry, because we moved from music being made available for $1 a track on iTunes and on Napster and on all, whatever other digital, I think the other one was Sound Galaxy was another one of them. Oh goodness, what was the one I'm thinking about? The Real Player one. I'll come back to it. But we did that and bought music online, and the physical medium started, thinning out. But then when people start consuming things digitally, then it's like, now we don't necessarily need a record label to release music. Now if I want to, I can build a following myself. I can go viral, and if I choose to release and distribute my music myself, I can do so. So the positive consequence of this is that the record labels have some leverage still left, but not much of it. And I think that's the one thing that I think is more positive than anything else, is that the artists now have tools at their disposal to take their own leverage their own fan base popularity, use their own creative agency, and do the things that they want to do now more so than ever, because of how we consume music. Because of that, file sharing revolution took pretty much the music industry and brought them to their knees. It made them change. And then eventually what happened is that they had to adapt to the way that things were done. And it also gave the artist more creative agency to understand, well, if I'm paying you to distribute my music, why can't I do that myself?
Right. I don't need you.
So those are the positive things about it. I mean, it's unfortunate though, because we did lose a lot of good record labels that eventually suffered as a result of this change in the industry, and they got swallowed up by a lot of the big boys, the Sonys, the Universals. But what it has done though, it has created an avenue now for artists to be able to take their own futures into their own hands and know that they can distribute to the medium and the way that people consume music the most now, which is online.
Right. That's a great, man. You make some great points. I think it's a lot, man, because coming from that era, we saw so much, and it was so much that was happening, and we really, the picture I want to paint for those who weren't around was that, like, we didn't see any harm in it. We maybe call us being naive or whatever, but we really didn't see any harm in it. It was just the fact of, like, I was thinking, like, oh man, I can get this Prince album. I don't have to go pay for it. I can go get it. But I'm not, in the end, I'm not helping Prince because I'm not paying for it. And he put his blood, sweat, and tears into that album that may have taken him a year to do. And I uploaded it for, it took me 20 minutes to upload it. And now I burned it to a CD that only cost me $10. So I've taken money from. So we robbed the artists as fans, really.
Yes.
But the record companies, I don't think we felt for them because we knew that they were getting over, and they had been getting over for so long. One of the positives I can say about file sharing was it exposed me, and I'm sure you probably say the same thing. It exposed me to so many artists that I never even heard of.
Absolutely.
Case in point, like, I remember, I'll never forget this guy, who I used to get a lot of stuff from. He had this thing, and it just said LIAB, and I was like, what is that? And so I didn't know what it was, so I clicked on it and I downloaded it because it was like, it said LIAB sampler. And what it was Leave It All Behind by the Foreign Exchange. I'd never heard of the Foreign Exchange. I'd
Okay.
never heard of Little Brother. I didn't know it,
Mm-hmm.
but what that did was that made me listen. And then I think at the time, that was right before the Minstrel Show came out, but I was able to go back and listen to the Listening, their first album. And
Yeah.
I was when I say I was hooked, I was trying to find every mixtape because
Yep.
that's another thing, folks. There were not just
Yeah.
albums, there were mixtapes. So if you didn't want to pay for the new, if you
Mixtapes.
didn't want to pay for the new DJ Clue mixtape, you could go on, Kazaa or LimeWire or Napster and get
Mm-hmm.
it. And like you
Yeah.
mentioned, PA Palace, I like go-go. I got exposed to go-go when I was at South Carolina State because my roommate, one of my best friends, from DC. And
Mm-hmm.
so moving here to Atlanta, there was one place in Southwest Atlanta that sold go-go music. And
Wow.
then they went out of business. And I was like, yo, man, I can't find no go-go. And I wanted to make
Mm-hmm.
me some CDs. And it was like,
Yeah.
and then I found PA Palace online. And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
snap. So now I'm downloading go. I mean, like you literally could get if you wanted the new Travis Tritt album, you could you could get it. If you wanted
Yeah. Absolutely.
the new Prince album, you could I
Yeah.
mean,
Anything.
everybody's music was online. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said earlier, the record companies just were like, what do you mean they're sharing music on the internet?
Yeah.
Because the internet at that particular time, it
Mm-hmm.
was we didn't use the internet like that. The internet was relatively new. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people, I use the internet basically just like I get on and I don't even think I pay my bills on it. I would get on and get in chat rooms, and
Mm-hmm.
we get in
Yeah.
there and
True.
talk trash about albums or we talk trash about sports or whatever like that.
Yeah.
The internet wasn't as advanced, so it wasn't like we were playing games against each other or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the record companies were just really, really naive and they just didn't. I mean, this went on for the better part of what you say about 2 or 3 years, maybe
Bro.
strong
Yeah,
before
man.
they
This.
got
Yeah. Well, before they got hip. I mean, I want to
yeah.
say really, man, the big ones like the file sharing clients, some of them got shut down one by one. But
Mhm.
I was in school and people were still using file sharing clients to download music, man. That
Yeah.
was in 2005.
Yeah.
You know, and then even when most of the big ones got shut down, there were still these little
Yeah. Yeah.
these little sites that would be out there, these outliers out there on the fringe, BitTorrent sites and the Pirate Bay, which is you can get movies, music, whatever you want, but you could find them anywhere. But then it wasn't really until I would say maybe 2010 where a lot of that stuff really that decade from 2010 to 19 where stuff like that really got shut down.
Right.
BitTorrents, file sharing clients. I'm sure there's some still out there, but
Probably.
I'm not willing to go out there to go find stuff because the other part about file sharing, boys and girls, is
Mhm.
that sometimes
Speak
you
on
would
it.
download something and it might have a virus on it.
Yep.
And that was just the risk you took, though,
Yep.
because you
Yep.
had to understand if you were downloading a file from somebody's computer, don't know whose computer that is. You don't know what they have on it. You don't really know what's in that file until you download it.
Right.
So sometimes you downloaded it and sometimes there was a virus in there. Sometimes there were, spyware, adware, tracking cookies, things like that we were completely naive about at that particular time. But
Right.
those are some of the risks you took with file sharing.
And we
So
didn't care. We didn't care.
eventually, yeah, and of course not. No. Nowadays, it's like you got a lot more at risk now. It's like I'm not going to sit there and try to download a thing for free. What is it? What is it? $10? Okay, I'll pay it. No big deal.
Right.
I mess around and put a virus on my computer, and God knows how much stuff I have on this, and nah.
Mhm. Yeah,
No, when
man.
you're a 21-year-old kid, though, who cares?
It was mad people going to the Best Buys and places like that trying to get their computers fixed because they had downloaded a file that had a virus. And again, like you said, you didn't know. Now the
Yeah.
flip side I want to ask, because a lot of people don't know this, but you were an artist at one point in time. How do you
Yeah.
feel as an artist if you were, let's say you were, an up and coming artist at that particular time and you're trying to get your music out there, and
Yeah.
here it is, you're putting in your time, your money, sweat, you're putting in your money because you're, and your time. And I'm in South Carolina or I'm in Atlanta and I'm taking your music. I'm like, oh man, y'all heard this new beat? Because you know how it is. If B
Yeah.
Cox got some shit that's bumping, not only am I
Yeah.
going to download it, but I'm gonna share it with my homeboy. And he
All
gonna
your
share it with his
homeboys.
homeboy. And next thing you know,
Boy.
so it's 10 people listening to your album, but you're not getting
Yeah.
a dime from it. So how do you feel about it from an
Exactly.
artist perspective? Because I do
Yeah.
remember one of my homeboys, my boy Jay Fresh, I talk about a lot on my podcast. He
Mhm.
would always say, oh man, you robbing an artist, man. You robbing an artist, man. You need to stop that shit. You need to stop that shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, the artists don't care. I was
Yeah.
being silly, but yeah, they do care. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you think you would have felt
Yeah.
as an artist, going through the file sharing era?
Well, man, to me, I was conflicted because as a consumer, I loved file sharing.
Mm-hmm.
As an artist, however, I wanted everybody, if when I put out little CDs and stuff and tried to sell them, like I want you to spend your money,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to do. Now, I was of the mindset that it was like, yeah, man, people, bootlegging and pirating Jay-Z and Nas and Busta and Wayne and Juvie and whoever else and Brandy and Aaliyah and whoever, but they're not gonna pirate me because my music ain't gonna get pirated. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm a little old dude, like burning CDs in my basement, like what I'm saying, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
selling them. I'm handwriting on them with markers.
Same
Before I
here.
got sophisticated and had the printed labels that I could actually peel off and put on the CDs, and I was like, that was
I
fancy.
never made it to that level.
Yeah, man. Well, I look, but it conflicts. It's a confliction because you understand when you go out and you meet other artists and the ones who are distributing at a much larger scale than you understand. But to me, I had the mindset, screw the record labels, hey, look, Jay-Z don't really care whether I'm buying a CD. Well, I'm sure he does, but
Right.
he doesn't, I'm sure he won't care if a few people don't buy his CD because, now here's the other part of it as well. The majority of folks who used to buy and consume music are, big surprise, our white brethren.
Of course.
White people used to buy CDs. They buy the majority of concert tickets. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us bootleg stuff, but I'm like, hey, they don't care whether or not they're missing my, $14 for a CD. Like, I don't care about that. But if it's my boy, group I grew up with, Godzilla, if it's Odyssey, if it's some of these guys or whatever, I'm gonna buy their music. Why? Because I was in their position at one point in time,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not gonna sit there and like, yo, I'm gonna burn you this joint. Like, yo, go out and go buy that joint. I bought it,
Yeah.
so you buy it. But
Right.
if it's Universal, if it's Sony, if it's whoever else, I was just like, man, screw them guys, man. I don't care. You want it? I got that Jay-Z. You want it? I'm gonna burn that joint for you tonight. I got you,
Right.
But at that point, I kind of like, yo, independent guys, any guys, all right, cool, I got you. I'm gonna buy your music. I want you to buy my music. But if it was the record labels, though, I was like, man, screw them dudes, man. Most part, I was just like, yo, I ain't gonna get a record deal. Like, I mean, I think I was one of the few artists that was kind of thinking that I was never gonna get a record deal because
Mm-hmm.
I think I always had it in my mind that I wanted to be independent no matter what. Even if I did meet a level of success, I wanted to be independent. I didn't care
Mm-hmm.
about getting a record deal because you heard all these horror stories of these artists getting screwed
Yeah.
royally in their recording contracts, man. So I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to be hot 2 years and then 3 years later I'll be broke. Like, nah. I want, even if I don't make it to Jay-Z status, if I don't say I got to be gold or platinum. Yo, if I could make silver, I'll be all right for the rest of my life. you know. So
Man,
that
that is so true.
it's a conflict, though. It was a conflict.
It really was, and I mean, like, it's one that I battled too because I looked at it from a fan's perspective, and then talking to my homeboys, they would say things like that too, like, man, you don't care about that, and I'm like, I cared about the artist, but ultimately I wanted the music because it was and
Mm-hmm.
the thing about it was music was just it was so much. It wasn't like how it was in '88 where Run
Mm-hmm.
DMC came out and then Eric B and Rakim came out and like they might be 3 or
Mm-hmm.
4 months apart. I mean, like you could have
Yeah.
literally a new Lil Wayne mixtape come out, on one
Mm-hmm.
day, and then the next
Yeah.
week it might be the new Nas album, and then the next week it might be Snoop's new album, and then the week after that it might be
Mm-hmm.
Wu Tang. And I mean, literally, you could, and then a point that you made earlier, the price went up. So it went from $8.99 to like $14.99. So at that
Yeah.
point, we're like, nah, man, I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be
Yeah.
broke. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm married, I got a kid, I can't
Mm-hmm.
afford to keep, but I love music. So, we kind of justified it in our minds as to
Yeah.
why we were going to stay with it, and then
Yeah.
and again, nobody stepped
Mm-hmm.
in. So when nobody stepped in, as far as like the record labels, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Yeah.
as long as
Right.
those sites were up, we were gonna keep showing up and
Yeah.
downloading. Why do you think the industry never really? Because I don't think it really recovered. Why do you think it ever never really recovered from the file sharing era?
I think the industry didn't recover from the file sharing era because it's sort of like this. And I hate to have to use this analogy. It's terrible, but it's really the only analogy that I could think about that makes the most sense to me to explain it this way. Imagine that you sell drugs, all right? You got the
Okay.
best drugs in the world.
Mhm.
No matter what happens, it doesn't matter what happens or what's happened with the economy, people lose their jobs. No matter what, people are going to buy your drugs. At some point in time, you may have less people buying your drugs because some people may lose their jobs, so you can't afford drugs anymore. But if you're addicted, you're going to find a way to keep buying drugs, right? That's what happens. You go, you put out a product, about 10% are addicts. The rest are going to be casual supporters or casual observers or casual users. But the addicts are where you're going to make your money. So it's the same thing with music. When you have drugs and you sell drugs, your addicts are going to get you money because they have to consume the product. Then you have the people who are sort of going to be a try it once or twice. So they'll buy it here and there, but they're not really going to make a whole lot of money. You're going to make your money really off of the addicts and the people who are going to be casual buyers. And the casual buyers may spend a little bit of money at one point in time, and then you won't see them in 4 or 5 months. Mm-hmm. So what happened is that the record company were the drug dealers. Okay. We were the consumers. They would literally put out the music. We would go and buy it, and they would make money because our profit margins were high. As you said, CDs went from at one point in time being this to being, I mean, you buy a double album will cost you like some $23, $24 for a double CD.
Right.
You might get a discount and get it like maybe at $20 for a double CD some places, but you buy a single CD some places, depending on where you went, it was like $15, $16. Mm-hmm. So the profit margins were high. When you introduce a supplier that is willing to give it away for free, I don't have to pay for these drugs anymore.
Right.
I can get them. Now, the quality of these drugs that I might get may not be the same quality of the drugs that the drug dealer is going to give me.
Bingo.
But if I can still get these drugs and still get high, geez, I'm blowing $100 a month on $100 a month or a week on drugs, and now I don't have to spend anything. Okay, am I getting as high as I was with the other one? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm not spending any money on it.
Free 99.
So let's say that free supplier gets shut down, but the game has been changed now because somebody has said, I have been able to buy drugs from this person, and they didn't charge me any money. You want me to come back and you want me to buy music from you. But I got it for free at one point in time. Mm-hmm. Why should I come back to you now?
Right.
So then what happens, right? When demand goes down, supply goes up. Economics, ladies and gentlemen, you have to be able to keep the price competitive in order to bring people back. So that's going to drop the price down. Then all of a sudden, CDs aren't as expensive they used to be anymore. Because then when you're selling music at $1 for a track, for a single track, nobody's buying a CD for $15 or $16 anymore.
Not at all.
Not when I can get the 10 best songs on the CD and buy those 10 best songs, and it costs me $10. Or if I only like 3, I can buy 3.
Thanks.
So when you introduce suppliers who disrupt the market, your business will never be the same. Mm-hmm. Now, and then if you change up distribution and the way you distribute those drugs, then the old way of you being able to meet somebody up at the gas station or pass on the street or stand on the corner, like I always tell people, the way that it is, the game is now, it used to be you would stand on the corner to sell your drugs.
Right.
You don't do that anymore.
Nope.
Same thing with the music. You don't go put your music in the store and say, hey, go buy my album. Like, nah. As a matter of fact, the way that you get music nowadays, you could never step in another music store another day in your life. And you could find a way to find out about an album coming out and consume it. Mm-hmm. And listen to it over and over and over again. They never recovered because the game changed when people started offering it for free. And then the consumers got hip and said, well, you're selling this before what you sold for $16.99. Now you're offering it for $9.99. It's cheaper now? I wonder why that is.
Right.
So we got hit, man, after a while. So the profit margin shrunk. Like we said, man, we lost a lot of labels, man. A lot of labels got eaten up by a lot of the big labels. So Now you only have a few major labels out there that are doing distribution. Like that's what the big labels offer. They offered you distribution, but it wasn't just distribution. Now the dollars are bigger, so now we're going to offer marketing. But then that game changed too, because when you found out that people weren't watching Rap City or weren't watching The Box or weren't watching Video Soul or Planet Groove or Teen Summit or pick the video show that you want to pick, 106 in Park. I mean, now, people can go on Facebook and find out about my album. Oh, there's sites like Hip Hop DX, and The Source now does their magazine online, and Double XL's their magazine online, and Complex, and everything changed. Yeah. So they never recovered because the way we bought changed. Our purchasing habits changed because once we found out we could get it for free and we saw the way how they moved, it was like, okay, well, I got this for free before. Right. And not only that, but I really like this song by Lil Wayne, but I don't know if I want the rest of this album. You know, no. I can buy these 4 or 5 songs and I'll be good. You know, why not? Yeah. I mean, so it's the record industry never, because the way that they move their product changed. Yeah. And as a result of that, the demand for the type of product they were moving, our appetite for it definitely changed. And as a result of that, their best-selling product became null and void. It was like that article you sent me about the the guy, basically the one that started a whole bunch of this shit, it's the guy who brought the record industry down. They call him Benny Glover.
Benny Glover, yep. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, and so they said basically when the feds eventually ended up raiding them that they left that duffel bag full of CDs because they said it was basically worthless. Wasn't worth anything. So we weren't consuming the products like that. So the industry fell, man, because we stopped buying the product as it was. We consumed the product in a different format, in a different format.
You're right. It everything changed and they never really recovered. And just to piggyback off of some of what you said, I mean, like the industry, I think the music industry died because they operated under a mindset of, they'll come back. They're consumers. We, like you said, we're these big record labels. We've gobbled up smaller record companies. We've pushed them out the door. We've, created, many monopolies. And so now, okay, well, what else they're going to do? Music has been around since the day of time. And since the beginning of time. So, it wasn't like we were going anywhere. But I think what happened was in the midst of them having that mindset and thinking that the people were just going to come back. We did come back. I mean, we obviously, because we need the music, but also what changed was our demands as far as what we thought was okay, because the record company says, okay, well, hey, we'll shut down these sites. We'll make the music available for you. We'll put it. You'll be able to you can buy ringtones.
Ringtones. Shout out to the ringtones. Oh man, what an era! You can
buy ringtones. You don't even have to buy an album. You can just buy this rapper's ringtone, and when your phone rings, it'll make this sound or whatever. And what happened was we got so cool with that our demands for the quality of music to sound a certain way, to look a certain way, for our artists to be a certain way, that fell way off. So it was just like, okay, they were just like, okay, hey, we're just going to give it to you. And what happened was, the product became so watered down. Like, I remember people always complaining about, man, they don't play real hip hop on the radio. And I full disclosure, I stopped listening to the radio. I haven't listened to terrestrial radio probably in the better part of 15 years, maybe longer than that. But, oh man, they don't play real hip hop on the radio. Well, you guys don't request real hip hop, so they're going to keep playing the same, the same 5 songs, the Migos and whomever else, Lil Baby, Lil Fart, Lil Squirt, all of them. So they're going to keep playing that over and over again, and they're going to turn the tape over and they're going to play it again. And so the demand for the quality of music shifted. So we stopped demanding that, and so I know, like, and I'm sure you get this a lot because people listen to your podcast and they think, oh man, well, you guys talk about those albums in the 90s and the 80s like they were just so great. They just sound pretty simple to me. Well, it's not so much about the simplicity of the album, but it's just the fact that you're listening to a Run DMC album and the album is complete all the way through. There might have been a song or two that, you probably could skip, but for the most part, you're listening to an album that is
Mm-hmm.
complete all the way through. There's highs and lows in the album. There's songs that make you get up. There's songs that inspire you. There's songs that radio friendly, so
Mm-hmm.
forth and so on. Same for Nas, same
Mm-hmm.
for Jay-Z, on down the line, Wu-Tang, whomever. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened was that got lost. And so then they just started saying, hey, we're just going to give you whatever. And so the
Right.
consumer was just like, okay, well, we'll take it because it's so much. I kind of refer to the music industry
Mm-hmm.
now as the buffet. It's the
Yes.
ultimate buffet.
Yes. Oh man, that is a
Everything is
great analogy.
everything is readily available. It's at the
Yes.
touch of a button, so you can, like we were talking a little earlier. My kids, my sons, no, they don't know. I've exposed them to the music that we talk about, and they're
Mm-hmm.
very insulated with that music, and they love it, But
Mm-hmm.
they don't understand the concept. Like our middle son Cameron, he's in college, he's a sophomore, and he's just now getting into vinyl. So like at
Yeah.
Christmas, I bought him some vinyl, and then he bought
Mm-hmm.
what did he buy? He bought he bought Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life the other day, and he texted to me, sent me a
Nice.
picture of it. And so I'm telling him, like, look, yeah, albums like that. I was like, they don't make music like that anymore because one,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not to say that the artists aren't talented anymore, but it's just we don't apply the pressure of, hey, you got to be dope, you got to come with it. Because
Yes.
here's the thing, we'll
Mm-hmm.
we as fans, and I'm not speaking for me and you because I know we're not like this, but fans will get excited over a snippet. Lil Wayne in the studio,
Yeah.
a snippet of him playing a track with Drake. Oh man, the new Wayne coming out. And everybody will be
Yeah.
so hyped up about it. And the album will come out and
Mm-hmm.
they'll play it and they'll talk about it for a day or maybe 2 days
And
or
that's it.
maybe a week. And then after
Mm-hmm.
that, it's all gone. And it's just because you're at the buffet. It's just like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
We never
Right.
looked at our artists and said, oh yeah,
Oh
that
man.
Thriller
Yeah.
album, it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was okay. It was okay. What you
Right.
got next? No, because what
Right.
happened
Yeah.
was when Thriller came out, we thought that was all that was ever coming out. Like we didn't know when the next
Yeah.
album was coming out. You had to,
Mm-hmm.
cherish
That's
it,
it,
and
man.
it's like a good steak. You want to cherish it. You want to relish every bite
Yeah.
of it. But no,
Enjoy it.
that's
Yeah.
exactly that's what the music industry has been. It's been a buffet, and
Mm-hmm.
some of it, a lot of it's been from the downfall from file sharing. But I
Yeah.
won't put it all on. I won't put it all on the record labels. I'll put it also on fans because we didn't say, look, you got to give us something better because we
Yeah.
got more in abundance. The product got watered down, and we were just okay with what was being given to us, and it hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah. Music used to be like a good cigar, and I'm a
Mm,
cigar smoker. And in my older age, I've been able to enjoy nothing more than I enjoy on a good afternoon, especially outside with a good bourbon and a cigar.
there
It
you
used
go.
to be something that you could sit and enjoy, and now it's like black and mild. I mean, that's what it's like now. Instead of it being a good cigar that you have to sit and enjoy, it's a black and mild. You smoke it, put it out, and it's like, all right, next joint, go ahead and
Yep,
get the next
yep,
blackout,
yep.
unwrap it and smoke it. And the reason being is a couple of things. I think file sharing is a result. This is a result of file sharing, but with the consolidation of labels didn't stop to be able to give you the time or the budget to really develop a good quality album.
Facts.
Now it's mass consumption. Most of the folks I know, like when we go on vacation, if we're at a resort and there's a buffet, like an all inclusive, people will be like, well, I don't really like that type of stuff. Like I get it, but you have to understand the food is being prepared for mass consumption. When
Mm-hmm.
you do that, at times the quality is going to suffer because it's for
Yep,
mass consumption. You
yep.
need the most amount of food in the shortest amount of time for the most amount of people. When eventually the industry saw that we stopped going away from quality and just went on to production and consumption as fast as we possibly could, the quality suffered. And then as a result, we didn't stop to enjoy things. Like, I'll give you a couple of examples. We've talked about Jay-Z 444 a couple of
Mm-hmm.
times. You and I on Twitter. We've, talked about it. I listened to it. I remember when it first came out, and I remember how big the buzz was of it when it first came out. And I listened to it the first time, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna give myself some time. I'm gonna listen to it. It's like 2 or 3 days later, I'll listen to it again. that last time that I listened to it was the last time that I listened to it. And that was like 4 years ago.
Same.
You know, now people have different opinions about 444. I tend to think that I don't have as high a regard for it as many people do. I think it's just okay. I think that, you know, there are some highlights on there. I think that, you know, Jay has some bright spots. No ID is a production wise is a bright spot. But to me, it's not nearly as big as some people I know that they big it up to be. And I'll just leave it at that. But I do feel like that sort of stayed in the consciousness maybe a little bit longer than others, only because it was Jay-Z. Right. But other than that, by the end of that summer, we were on to the next thing. Then I'll also go on to something else. This past fall, Silk Sonic released their debut album. Silk Sonic being Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars. We know how big was Leave the Door Open was when it came out, and then they came out with Skate, and then eventually they released right before they released. They did the Smoking Out the Window. That came out, and this is an album that was 9 tracks, featured Bootsy Collins, like a slamming project, really just awesome. I listened to it. I listened to it for maybe a week, and then I stopped listening to it. Now, it wasn't that it wasn't a good project. I thought it was exceptional. I said that the first day it came out. I said, man, this is one of the best projects of the year. But ask me how many times I've listened to it since that week.
You're probably not going
back
to it.
You know, and I probably may not. I mean, maybe once in a while I'll get a hankering for it if I want to hear a particular sound. But for the most part, though, it's just the nature of how it is. Once we got into consumption and production at a higher rate, just give it to me. When quality suffered, man, we didn't stop and enjoy music anymore, you know? And I think that grew as a result of, oh, shoot, they can download all this music for free. Oh, they're getting all these releases coming out. It's getting leaked 2 weeks before it comes out. Quick, we have to come up with stuff. Quick, it needs to be something new. Quick, it needs to be something fresh and hot and exciting, and people get excited about it. And the excitement lasts for, like, some people only last for a week or two. And then after that, it's like, all right, what's the next thing coming out?
Oh, what's the next thing coming out? It's not even on the timeline anymore.
Yeah. Not even on the timeline anymore. Talk about it. Goodness.
No, man. It comes and goes.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. And I remember just even using an artist like Kendrick Lamar when his Damn album came out. I remember people just, you know, fawning over it. And it was a great album. Yeah. But I just remember some people like, man, I wonder what he's gonna do next. I'm like, bro, his album just dropped. Like,
just came out. Yeah.
And you know, and then you have the fans that are like, man, Kendrick, he's taking too long to come out. No, he's doing what he saw his predecessors do. You know, you drop an album, you tour for a year, you take some time to let it sit, and then you get back in the studio in a couple more years, and then you can do it all over again. You don't have to. Well, and Kendrick's obviously a different case because he's at a level of superstardom that most people aren't. So he doesn't have to do that. But, you know, I mean, you take somebody like, even somebody as popular as Kanye, you know, he'll drop an album and then like, okay, here's another album 6 months later. I mean, like, you're not even giving people, back to the buffet thing, you're not even giving people a time to consume the food that's on their plate before you're pushing more food in front of them.
Yeah.
And they get full, and just like anybody else, what you gonna do? Push the plate away.
Yep.
You're gonna push the plate back and sit back and be like, all right, I'm full.
All right, I'm good.
I'm good.
I'll
do something else.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Man. Oh goodness.
And so we went from file sharing to streaming. Now I know you guys have talked about this on your podcast before too. How much do you think streaming has helped or hurt the industry?
I think streaming has helped the industry from a certain respect. I still think there's a problem with equity when it comes to artist compensation when it comes to streaming. We've seen this. You've seen the numbers show up on Twitter. You see, like, you know, Apple Music, what the pay per stream amount is based on these different providers. Some of them are criminally low. I mean, it's like, you know, oh, great, this person just had 1 million streams this past week. Okay, what does those 1 million streams equal out to? Right. You know, a single goes, you know, diamond. Like I've just listened to a couple of like artists that went diamond, their singles went diamond. And it's like, what does that even mean anymore? Because like people aren't buying this music. Like some folks may buy the single for $1, but I mean, what does going platinum even mean anymore? You know, it's streaming. it's not streams because y'all are paying less than 1 cent for a stream in some cases, you know?
Right.
So it's in some cases, I think there's still a problem with artist equity from an accessibility standpoint. I think this is where it's helped. It has allowed the discovery of like you said, like file sharing did with you, it brought you onto the foreign exchange, eventually brought you to Little Brother, or brought you to the listening. Right. Streaming has found a way in a lot of these sites like Spotify and Pandora, get you into artists and songs and albums that you may have never listened to before because of the way that you consumed music. What streaming has done now is made listening to music so easy, where before you had to take the packaging off the CD or the tape, take it out of the packaging, put it into the tape deck or into the CD player, press play, press pause, press stop, rewind. Now listening to music is as easy as going to Apple Music or Spotify, pulling up a playlist, pulling up an album, pressing play. And that's it. Look at how we put out our podcasts. I mean, it's as easy as going to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or iHeart or Stitcher. It's so easy for you to be able to discover things nowadays where it's almost like being in a garden of lots of good fruits and vegetables. You know, some of them are going to be rotten, but you know, for the most part, you can find some good stuff out there. You know?
Right.
You can find some good stuff out there.
That is so true.
That's the good thing about streaming, in a respect that you can discover so many different things. I've found so much music that I've put on with playlists. You put on an artist playlist and stream for type of music you're listening to. I've just discovered everything from new jazz music that I didn't know about before, to reggae, to soca music, calypso, bossa nova, and not even to mention hip hop and R&B. You know, there's a lot of things you find out about things on the streaming. And I think I got to think definitely being on Apple and Spotify for a big part of my day when I work, either listening to podcasts, listening to music, for helping me do that. Now, the artist equity thing we still got to find a way to do that, man, because there's something wrong if Spotify is paying someone hundreds of millions of dollars to podcasts. And the reason why most people are on Spotify, and the first reason for music, why artists can only get X amount of money per stream. I mean, we got to find a way to fix that, man. We have to find a way to fix that. But Spotify and streaming has helped me find a lot of good music. A lot.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. It's exposed me to a lot. You know, I pay for Spotify, and you know, I've just now really probably in the last year or two started getting into, you know, creating playlists and stuff like that. Just stuff that I want, you know, if I'm going to the gym, stuff I want to hear, whatever the case may be, or even listening to people's playlists. I do miss, you know, having my CD tower, you know, and then you just come in here, you see a CD. Oh man, you know, man, I ain't heard that Freeway in a minute. Let me pop that in. Yeah, I miss that. And I think that's where streaming kind of, you know, I don't want to say bothers me, but it's indifferent for me, because sometimes you would go to that CD tower and you would pull a CD just because you haven't heard that CD in a while. And I think with streaming services, you're not going to do that. So there's going to be some music that you have access to, you know, that you may or may not ever go back to. And it's not because it's not because the music is bad. It's just there's so much music that's available. Again, you're back at the buffet. You know, you're at the buffet. You're looking at the meat. You're like, man, all right, I don't need no mashed potatoes. I got. Let me get a piece of this steak here. Let me get some chicken. Let me get some baked chicken. You know, and next thing you know, you just got, you know, a plate full of meat, and you don't have no kind of greens or nothing.
Yeah, right.
And so
balance the plate out.
Right. You know, so it's like, so it's different. It's really different, and it's changed how we listen to music. And like you mentioned, podcasts, with us being podcasters, we listen to a lot of podcasts. So, you know, I have my points in the day where I'm like, okay, I've listened to enough podcasts, or I have my scheduling as far as the podcasts that I listen to. And then I'm like, okay, I need to hear some music. Okay, let me listen to Run DMC. Okay, let me listen to Jay-Z. Let me listen to Nas. Let me listen to Outkast, or whatever like that. And what I try to do, and it's something I do consciously, I try not to listen to the same music that I've heard. Like if I've heard Nas this week, if I listen to Illmatic today, I'll probably don't need to listen to it on Friday. You know what I'm saying? I need to, you know, and I try, but it's just because I don't have that CD tower in front of me anymore. And you know, kids, for those of you listening, we used to have CD towers, and like
Yeah.
B Cox mentioned earlier with the CD book, we
Yep.
graduated from the CD book to the CD towers, which was these huge towers that where we put our CDs in, and you could just
Yeah.
physically see the CD. But
Yeah.
now you have your CD in your phone, and you
Right.
don't have to go to Best Buy if you want to buy an album. You can buy it on your phone, and you don't ever have to leave the comfort of your home. And
Yeah.
things have changed, and I don't, the music industry. I titled this podcast, when music industry died, and it did die. It's still dying, really, and I don't really know if there's anything that we can do to resuscitate it. It's just we've kind of adapted to where it is, and it would take a lot to move it back to where it could be,
Right.
if you will.
Yeah.
No,
Definitely.
did you want to say something?
No, I think one thing about with streaming, what it does is that now playing music is so easy. I mean, shoot, now you can bring music with you places you never could before. I mean, case in point, we were on my honeymoon in Jamaica. I have a Bluetooth speaker I bring with me, and it's a waterproof Bluetooth speaker. You could actually bring it with you. Some folks who want to listen to music in the shower, which always kind of tripped me out because I don't need to listen to music while I'm in the shower, but some people do. But you can bring it to you at the pool or put it in the shower. So we were at the beach and we went to go sit out on the beach. She said, bring the Bluetooth speaker with you. So we sat out there, and as we sat on the on the chair with the covering on it and sat out and chilled and we're listening to music out there with the Bluetooth speaker. I mean, it makes it so easy to be able to. Before you had to, you had to bring a boom box out with you. You know what I'm saying? Or portable music player.
You get shot.
Exactly. Or if you had a phone back in the day when most phones, some of them still do have headphone jacks. When you put it in the headphone jack and plug it into some speakers, you just now started being able to connect them through Bluetooth. But now you can literally take music wherever you go. And it's nothing for you to pull up your phone and be like, hey, let me let you listen to this real quick. It's nothing. It's not like, hey, you got a CD player, you got a tape player. Like, no. But now you can play music so easily now. So that's what I love about it. Now I can listen to music in my car, at work, at home, and use different devices to listen to them through and not have to worry about going to find something to play it on. Though I will say, these last few years, vinyl's been making a comeback, and I'm glad that it has been, and its popularity to where now people are starting to collect again. And now you have people like, there are so many pieces like vinyl collector's items out there and the stores are starting to actually become a lot more popular nowadays, these vinyl stores. And, I like to see that, because if it's one thing that I think out of all the mediums, man, you can listen to a good tape, a good CD, even digitally. But to me, man, there's nothing like listening to music on vinyl. Nothing. That sound is a sound that you cannot replicate on any digital medium whatsoever. None.
Right. And what's crazy? I was mentioning, our son, he had been talking about getting, starting to get vinyl or whatever like that. So what happened was, as fate would have it, we bought him a vinyl player, a record player for Christmas, and his girlfriend did too. So he had two. So he's like, so I'm like, man, what you gonna do? I was like, you gonna take one bag? I was like, if you need to take it back, you can take it back. He's like, no. He's like, Dad, I'm gonna take one with me to school, and I'll leave the other one here. And so I was like, all right. I said, so what you gonna do? You gonna leave it in your room? He's like, yeah. So he left it in his room. So I'm thinking, crazy me. I'm thinking, oh man. I was like, man, I can go in there and play some of his vinyl. And I didn't think that he'd take the records with him to school. So he took the records to school. So there's a vinyl player here with no records. And I was like, man, you know what? I probably need to go buy a couple just for myself. And then I was like, you know what? If I start buying vinyl,
oh boy, watch out.
Why? Because that's what we grew up on, man.
Yeah.
And, that, like you said, that sound, that crackling sound of a record being put down for the first time, you can't put a price tag on that. It is such a dope sound. But I'm with you. I'm all for it. And I was explaining to him, I was like, yeah, you're going to look for some records that you won't find. I was like, because everybody's not pressing vinyl. I said, you'll see now that some companies are, some artists are for certain albums or whatever. I was like, but if you want to try to find something, you can't find it, let me know. I said, I'll try to find it for you. But yeah, it's about to be his expensive habit, which was gonna be expensive for me because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna end up buying some stuff for him.
Yeah, good stuff though, man. Good
Before
stuff.
we get out of here, man, please tell the folks where they can find you, where they can find the podcast, man. This has been dope, man. We definitely gonna have you on again, man. Because me and you, we can talk music all day long.
All day long, man. This is what I do, man. But definitely, of course, thank you for having me on again. I love being on here. I love talking music with you. We definitely got to have you on the pod again for another review this year. As I said, y'all, Kyle, for the Stakes is High one is definitely within my top 5 to 7 downloads. Listen, y'all love the episode, so thank y'all for listening, and thanks to Kyle for coming on. But where you can find us, well, first I'll start with my social media channels. You can follow me personally on social media at It's Lesson on Twitter and also on Instagram at ITS Lesson on Twitter and Instagram. You can catch me there. You can also catch me on Instagram on the pod at Vault Classic Pod. That's at Vault Classic Pod. On Twitter at Vault Classic. And if you lose track of any of those, just go to vaultclassicpod.com. That's the website. And you'll be able to get to my Instagram, to my Twitter, to my YouTube page, to my Facebook page. I have a private Facebook community for fans and fans only. So we do a couple of things in there. We got a couple of interactive things we're going to be doing later on this year. But it's all at vaultclassicpod.com. Go ahead and get there. You can follow me on social media. All the links are there. All the episodes are there. And you can leave a review. And if you're tempted to do so, you can also go there and leave a voicemail message and leave a message just for the show. Let us know what you think. And I'll even play some of them on a couple of my shows if I'm tempted to do so. So vaultclassicpod.com. You can get the social media and all the episodes right there.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, you guys have been listening long enough. You know where to find me. If you don't, you can find the 12 Kyle podcast on any podcast reader. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight without fail. Make sure that you subscribe because from time to time this year we'll be dropping new podcasts and bonus episodes on Sundays at midnight as well. And the Vault Classic podcast drops every Monday, correct?
Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern time.
9 a.m. without fail. Without fail. So you guys know, and you can catch this YouTube channel, youtube.com, spell it out, TWELVEKYLE. So the videos here on the YouTube channel. So that's going to do it for us. When the music died, I got my boy B Cox in the building. Make sure that you, like I said, hit him up on social media and check out this podcast because, again, I'm not just saying it because he's here. It's one of my favorites, and I listen religiously every week. And they got some dope shit, man. So anytime you listening to dope stuff, you want to have dope people around. Like I said, I'm going to definitely have him back on. But that's going to do it for us. So for my man B Cox, I'm your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5 G's.